Welcome to a Legendarium special about the history behind H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. In this episode, we will learn about what inspired H.G. Wells to write a book that continues to inspire us to this day. Hubert George Wells began his epic journey on September 21st, 1867, born into the small town of Kent outside London. His father, Joseph, worked as a gardener, while his mother, Sarah, worked as a lady's maid. The young family invested their life savings into a porcelain shop called Atlas House. Young Wells grew up in the dark and dirty shop basement, able to watch the shoe-covered feet of passers-by. At age 7, young Wells broke his leg and found himself confined to bed. Wells later called this his lucky moment, as it gave him little choice but to read and read some more. By age 10, he started writing and illustrating his own books, the first called The Desert Daisy. It had a title page, chapters, and an editor's preface, which read, "Dear reader, you have in your hands The Desert Daisy, a romance of olden times. I believe that if this book is not read when Shakespeare is forgotten, then it will have been grievously ill-treated." Sadly, the Wells shop went bankrupt after H.G.'s 13th birthday. His parents took him out of school and made him a draper's apprentice. He proved a poor employee, often reading when he should have been working. After 3 months, Wells joined his mother, who now worked in a country mansion. There, young Wells devoured the travel fantasies of Jonathan Swift and Daniel Defoe. Wells also discovered a telescope and spent night after night studying the moon's craters. This ended when Wells' mother apprenticed him to another draper. She hoped that he would hold this job for the rest of his life, which took no account of his great talents. By the age of 15, Wells returned to his mother and threatened to commit suicide if he could not leave the draper's trade forever. Sarah moved Wells into a primary school, where he worked hard as a teacher's assistant, but also threw himself into a learning frenzy. He won every prize that could be won in chemistry, geology, and botany, racking up both cash prizes and attention. Finally, young Wells won a scholarship to the normal school and resolved to become a man of science. Wells' teacher, Thomas Huxley, became famous for his fearsome defense of Charles Darwin at every opportunity and had become known as Darwin's bulldog. Huxley's teachings about evolution utterly captivated Wells. This theory raised frightening possibilities about man being the product of adaptation rather than divine creation, and held that men could go extinct just like any other animal, a terrifying thought to the deeply religious people of the late Victorian age. Huxley also taught the theory of entropy and decay, believing the universe would slowly lose its dynamism and simply grind to a stop one day, perhaps a scientific version of Armageddon. After college, Wells became a scientific journalist and taught at Henley House School. There, his students included future Winnie the Pooh author A.A. Milne, who described Wells as a poor schoolmaster, too clever for his students and too temperamental to be endured. With these 2 jobs, Wells supported his aging and widowed mother. Unfortunately, Wells' marriage to a cousin named Isabel Wells ended in failure, mainly because Isabel hated intimate relations. At the age of 26, Wells became ill with tuberculosis, and from his sickbed he became pen pals with Amy Robbins. Upon recovering, Wells abandoned his first wife and ran away with Amy. This broke every taboo in strict Victorian society, even getting the couple thrown out of a boarding house when the landlady learned of their relationship. However, Wells found his first success by publishing a biology book illustrated by Amy, including a picture of a rabbit dissecting a man. Encouraged, Wells plunged into what he called his secret treasure, a book about a device no one imagined before, a machine that could travel through time. Wells himself said that if the book failed, he would know that he could be a journalist and a teacher, but nothing else. In 1886, during his college years, Wells published a short story in a student magazine called The Chronic Argonauts. During the years since, Wells worked on it through 6 drafts before submitting it to a publisher under the title The Time Traveler. On the manuscript, Wells optimistically wrote, "Please type in your best style." While Wells only received £100 for what would be called the Time Machine, it made his reputation. Scientific romances, the grandfather of science fiction, had been written before, most famously by Jules Verne. However, Wells' work proved far more provocative because he, unlike Verne, had a scientific background. Specifically, Wells applied Darwinian evolution to humanity's future. The unnamed time traveler goes to the year 802, 701 BAD, where he comes to an Edenic world populated by frail elf-like people called the Eloi. When he first meets them, the time traveler suspects that life became too easy and people degenerated with no hardship or work to make them stronger. This criticized both the Victorian preoccupation with making life better and the promise of socialism, then a powerful political philosophy to free people not only from trouble, but work. As the time traveler explores this new world, he notes ducts sticking up from the ground, part of a ventilation system. Next, the time traveler learns that white ape-like creatures live in the great factories underground. This makes the time traveler believe that the inequality between the idle rich and the toiling poor, already stark in Wells' time, simply grew worse through the centuries. Wells, despite coming from humble beginnings, did everything he could to ingratiate himself to wealthy and powerful men, despite often being disgusted by their moral and physical weakness. It is easy to imagine that such men inspired the frail elfin Eloi. And next, in a scene inspired by the classic myths of heroes plunging into the underworld, the time traveler ventures into the underground factories searching for his stolen machine. There he learns the Morlocks hunt, murder, and eat the Eloi. Now he realizes that the Morlocks, descendants from a working class forced underground, take revenge upon their former masters by hunting and eating them. This served as a criticism of both socialism and capitalism, well as making it clear that neither system would deliver paradise. Fleeing the Morlocks, the time traveler goes millions of years in the future to escape the rampaging beasts. Despite going thousands of years each second, the time traveler realizes he can distinguish day and night, a sign that days have become many years long. The sun grows larger and redder until the time traveler realizes that Earth stopped rotating. After stopping the machine, the time traveler finds himself on a sloping beach covered with vegetation. He goes forward again to avoid becoming a meal for a giant crab-like monster. He continues going forward, stopping every 100 years to watch the old Earth ebb away. Finally, he sees the end of history as Mercury settles in front of the sun and shrouds Earth in lifeless darkness, save for a black blob with tentacles flopping about in the distance. This is the end of history. The solar system collapsed into motionless entropy as imagined by Wells' old teacher Huxley, the scientific age's version of Armageddon. Nonetheless, the time traveler comes home to his own time, determined to face history as best he could, despite knowing how it would end. During the 5 years that followed the publishing of The Time Machine, Wells launched into a creative frenzy, writing some of the most famous works in the new genre of science fiction. They include War of the Worlds, The Invisible Man, and The First Man on the Moon. In 2002, Simon Wells, the grandson of H.G. Wells, directed a film adaptation of The Time Machine. Despite being only one of 2 adaptations of Wells' classic work, it has inspired countless other books and films, including the iconic film franchise, The Terminator. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.